welcome back to K&K Real Talk. I am so excited about today's episode. We had some hot topics going on in the Endometriosis and Me group, and so I thought, why not bring in another professional to talk more about this? So if this is your first time watching or listening, I'm Kenny King, one of the K's to K&K Real Talk. I am basically your resident health, wellness, life coach here to help you make shit happen. So whatever your goals are, we cut through the BS and get you to crushing them. And I'm here today with a colleague, friend, another coach that I very much admire and respect. This is health coach Tavia. She is a Lyme disease survivor, Lyme disease fighter. And today we're going to be talking about that connection between Lyme disease and endometriosis. So Tavia, I am so glad that you decided to come on and join us here today. So happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about this connection with everybody and share some information and share some insights.
Absolutely. So one of the reasons that I asked you, like, please come on, let's have this conversation, let's get this information out there, is that there's just not enough people yet understand that there happens to be a link. And whenever I did share one of the fantastic research-rich posts that you posted recently in the group, there was a lot of confusion, like, wait a second, doesn't Lyme come from ticks? Like, what are you talking about connection? And questions like, how do we get tested or how do we figure this out? So I would love it just to start. Could you share with us, because like I told you before, I know very little about Lyme. Could you tell us a little bit about what Lyme is, what the symptoms look like?
Sure. So Lyme disease is predominantly, it comes from ticks, deer ticks especially. It is a bacterial infection. It's not a virus. So when the tick basically bites you, they inject this horrible bacteria called Borrelia. And it's not a good bacteria to get. Let's put it that way. But aside from ticks, actually, they are showing that it's not just in ticks anymore. It's in mosquitoes. It's in fleas. So yeah,
wow.
It's not just ticks. And I was one of those that, and most people who get Lyme disease don't even know or recall getting ever bit by a tick. That's the funny thing. It's like less than 50% even realize. The classic sign of it is getting like a bullseye's rash on your leg or somewhere. I don't ever recall getting that anywhere. And like I said, most people don't. And so unfortunately, what tends to happen is that we go undiagnosed for many, many years because we just don't know that we got bit or, what happened. And ticks are so small too. I have to point out. So, they're the little nymph ticks. They're like the size of a poppy seed. Those are the worst kind of ticks. And those are the ones that transmit the Lyme the worst, if you will. And so no, a lot of people don't even know, they have in the hair and back of their ear, and they think it's a piece of dirt, So Lyme is everywhere, and no one's immune to it. It's not just on the East Coast; it's everywhere in the world, if you will. I mean, there's some parts, of course, like in Antarctica, the ticks aren't going to survive up there in the freezing cold. But it's everywhere. And so when I live here in the state of Washington, and a lot of times people say, "Oh, we don't have ticks over here." Heck yeah, we do. And I grew up camping my whole life. I grew up on a farm. Who knows? I don't really know to this day when I got it. I think it was many, many years ago. And looking back, I think I had it as a kid. And then just it got festered up more and more and grew as I got older. So yeah.
How interesting. I had no idea, first of all, that it wasn't only isolated to ticks. And I would always been curious about that. Like, is it possible that you just because I know, okay, when I think about childhood, when I think about being outside and camping, I know that I'm pretty sure there must have been a point where at some point I had a tick like on me, right? I at least remember it happening, even if it wasn't my body, like it could have been my little brother. Like I just remember that being a thing, you know, that your dog might have a tick or something like that. If you're outside, it's just normal. You do the whole, there's like all these tricks to removing them and all these different things. So I just didn't realize, like, I guess I always assumed that you have the bite and you start feeling sick maybe, or like you said, the red bullseye. So what you're saying is a lot of people have no recollection of ever being bitten by a tick.
Correct. Yeah.
Some people do not get the red bullseye, like rash type. Was that what it was called?
Bullseye's rash. Yeah.
Bullseye's rash. Okay.
Like a bullseye.
Yeah. So the bullseye's rash. And so sometimes this can just be in the body, sort of underneath the surface, festering for years and years before people start to really experience it at a chronic level.
Correct. So yeah, and may I talk about that a little bit, the chronic versus the acute?
Yes.
So there's two different stages of Lyme. There's acute, and that's like when you get the rash, you know it. Usually you can go, if you have that rash, you can go to your doctor and say, look, and they're like, oh yeah, and they'll give you some doxycycline or some antibiotics, and then they'll treat you for a good, usually about 30 days is what you're supposed to do. And usually you can kick it, you know, you can kick it if you know when you have it, and you're usually good. Now, the problem is that most are chronic Lyme patients out there, and that's where we all go years undiagnosed, and we get the tummy aches, we get the flu-like symptoms, we get the chronic fatigue, we get the gut issues, the female issues, we get the headaches, the migraines, the joint pain, and those things start adding up over the years, and that's kind of what happened with me. And then usually it takes, like they say, it could be a car accident, it could be a trauma, a life change, something where it'll bring it out full force. So for me, it was October of 2015 is when I got diagnosed. But prior to that, I'd been going through a lot of stress, a lot of changes in my life. And so I think that was the precursor for me, was it was bringing that out because my immune system was going low. So it's hard to get diagnosed because of the fact that there's so many overlaying symptoms that mimic other things as well. My first diagnosis was chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. They thought I had MS. I had mono in college. Epstein-Barr is another precursor to Lyme. Most with Lyme seem to have Epstein-Barr virus going on too. So there's a rheumatoid arthritis. All of those seem to come into play. Lupus, another one. They all get those diagnoses first before they actually go into, hey, let's take a Lyme test, or let's go down that rabbit hole and see if there's Lyme. And the reason why they don't do that is because it is so hard to diagnose. You have to match it up with the blood work test with your symptoms, and it takes sometimes a good doctor to figure that out. I went through 10 different doctors before I got it figured out.
Wow. And what I'm noticing with what you're sharing, most of those, everything that you listed, all of those conditions that seem to be diagnosed first, they're systemic, they're autoimmune, they're inflammation or stress dependent, right? Like that's interesting because, you know, as soon as we link this over and say, okay, well, how are Lyme and Endo, you know, where's the link here? And all I can think and what's coming to me is going, okay, well, Endo is inflammation dependent. Endo is, you know, it's systemic. It's now being called an autoimmune condition. And so that's such an interesting link. And Endo is similar in that any chronic stressors can exacerbate the symptoms and make the symptoms come roaring out, even if you've like kind of had them at bay for years. Some sort of physical or emotional trauma can like almost bring those things, the symptoms out to the surface, even if you're relatively healthy. Exactly. So I'd love to hear your insight as to the connection between Lyme and Endo.
Gotcha. So for me, I my period at when I was 14 years old. So normal age, right, of puberty or whatever. But I remember from day one when I actually stayed home from school because I was homesick and I didn't know what was going on. I just thought, woke up throwing up. And then later on, that day I'm like, oh, Miss Flo's here. Nice.
Yeah.
A little personal information there. But from that day forward, I had problems with my menstrual cycles. I had cramping, really bad cramping, heavy periods. I constantly had problems, and I was going to doctor after doctor and just didn't seem right. So they diagnosed me with endo at age 16, actually. So
wow.
I was very, very young. Yeah. And I had, which was called the microscopic endometriosis. You're familiar with that? Yeah. So I didn't have, which was the physical, what they call chocolate, embedded. It was more like, it was microscopic. So it was inflamed. And so I had I've had 3 surgeries for my endometriosis as well. First one at 16, another one at 21, 22, and then another one years later. And I've had cysts as well. So looking back in time, did I have Lyme back then? I think I did. Because as I create this picture of going back in time, I can relate. I was pretty sick as a kid too growing up. Like I said, I don't know when I contracted Lyme disease. I just don't know. But I will say this, we tested my mother after I found out, and my mom tested positive. And I will say this, mothers can be carriers of Lyme disease.
Interesting.
It can be in utero. The uterus, the cervix, all of that, that's just a happy little growing place for microorganisms, right? For bacteria. So now my mom, let me revert back. My mom does not have any like classic Lyme problem. She has a little bit of gut issues every now and then, but for the most part, she doesn't have like all the symptoms like I do. So she has a pretty good immune system. And that's what it comes down to, Kenny, is when you have that good immune system too. When you have a good immune system, you can usually fight off these things.
Right.
And so that's what so going back again, so endometriosis, 16 years old, having that. And then here I am, oh my gosh, do I want to say my age? No. I'm in my 40s. And like I said, I got diagnosed in 2015 of Lyme. And now someone told me, hey, you have endo? Oh, Lyme? Oh. So the connection there, again, is that bacteria, right? And that immune system. There's that connection there. And now after learning more about Lyme and my journey and talking to other women, I would say about a good percentage, I'd say at least 75% of the women that I've talked to that have Lyme disease also have endometriosis or female infertility problems or other issues in that area. And why is that? Well, it makes sense. Let's think about it. I mean, Lyme is a bacteria. Like I just said, where does bacteria like to take up shop? Nice warm spots, right? So happy little places. And so there's kind of the connection there, if you will. So they're finding that a lot of women who have Lyme have the female issues, or have the female issues first, infertility, other things, and the light's going weird on me. And then it's like, oh, and then we got the fatigue, and then we got other things that are popping up, joint issues, headaches, migraines, which those are very similar to endometriosis and female related issues, right? The migraines and the fatigue and pain and with periods and stuff like that. And the pain in the lower gut, constipation, diarrhea issues. Those are all Lyme related too. So again, it's hard, it's hard to diagnose Lyme disease, and yes, there is a connection. Does everybody that have Lyme have endometriosis? Absolutely not. But there's a big percentage that we're finding out that do. So.
Well, and what's interesting too is even if you're, because there's no one saying like, oh, you can, like it's a little bit going, there are these things that we get exposed to, or there are things that are going on in our bodies. And when our immune system tanks, when our bodies are not in a thriving, healthy state, we're more susceptible to all of these particular diseases, like sort of being able to cultivate, thrive, and live in our bodies. So the healthier we are, the more we boost our immune system, the more we lower our stress, the higher quality foods we eat, the more we move our bodies and get that sweat going so the body can release like, you know, toxins and cleanse itself and detox at night, high quality sleep, like all of these things that we know about, but everybody isn't necessarily doing. These are all things that can be really, really supportive no matter what the diagnosis. Because one of the ladies, which I totally respect this response, but you know, one of our fantastic Endo Sisters that like saw that initial post when I posted it, when I shared your post, was like, I can't handle another diagnosis. And I completely understand that. Like, if you're listening, if you're watching and that's you, like, we totally get that. Like, you just heard Tavi explain, like 10 doctors, all of these diagnoses, even like multiple sclerosis, like what the hell is going on with my body? Like, so many of us have been in that place where we get misdiagnosed, the doctors don't have a clue, and underneath the surface is just lurking a system that is having a hard time functioning. So the more when our immune system tanks, we're more susceptible to other things and other symptoms. And so I've seen this happen a lot where when people get a diagnosis and they start a treatment plan, even because of the treatment plan, they get new diagnoses, you know, because of the way that they're responding to medications or certain surgeries and things like that. So we have to like look at the whole person and look at what's going on. So it might sound overwhelming. And if you feel overwhelmed, we totally get that. Yeah. Our message today is, though, there's so much power in knowing what's happening within your body or what's possible. So if you're working on managing and improving your endo and the chronic fatigue or the, you know, the digestive distress is just like, seems like there's just still something happening that you're not sure of, or even if you're just curious, we encourage you to get curious and get tested for Lyme so that you're not in the dark and you have options and choices. And Tavi, I'd love to hear, for those who are interested in getting tested, because you did mention it can be tough to get an accurate diagnosis. What would you say would be some tips or what would you tell people who are looking to get tested for Lyme?
Yeah, so here's a little background about the Lyme testing. So the Lyme testing is somewhat flawed in the sense of, so typically it's a blood test that you take. There are some urine tests as well, and those seem to be a little bit more highly responsive and highly more reactive, if you will. Though the test that I had done was through Igenics Lab, and it was in California. It's not a cheap test, I will say that, and that's the other problem. It's expensive to get tested. We're talking probably about $500 sometimes. And so it's a blood test. It is a simple test once you get it done, and usually you'll know within a couple weeks. But what happens with Lyme, those little buggers, they hide. And they hide in your tissue, they hide in your organs, they hide in your bones. And what the Borrelia, or the little Lyme bacteria, they're called spirochete, and they literally look like little spirals. And they dig and they embed in your tissue. And so what happens is sometimes, you know, you may contract Lyme and one just little spiral sheet may be hanging out, you know, and your body may at that time be like calm and fighting it, and the immune system's on high alert and it's doing well. And then at some point you may go back in and be like, and so you'll go get tested and it'll be negative. And then you'll go back in 6 months later and you're feeling fatigue and you're feeling all these symptoms again, your immune system's down, you go and test it, and then it's positive. So then you're like so confused, right? Because you're like, do I have false positive, false negative? And that's the major controversy right now with Lyme disease. It's so frustrating for people because it's like, oh, I tested negative. You have to, here's the thing of it. You have to look at the bands. There's certain numbers like band 41, band 23, band 21. There's bands that you can be exposed to. If you have one band, you have Lyme in your body. Okay, you've been exposed to it. And so when people come to me and they say, oh, I got tested and it said negative, I said, what? Let me see your Western blot test that shows the bands. And I'll look at it and I'm like, no, you have Lyme. You've been exposed to Lyme. And they're like, oh, my doctor says I don't. Well, here's the thing. The CDC says you have to have 3 bands before they'll recognize you as having quote unquote Lyme disease. So, but that's a CDC marker. Okay. And I won't go down that rabbit hole. I won't go down that political thing, but you can read between the lines there. Okay. So if you just have one, you have been exposed to Lyme. And so that's where I come in as, you know, when I do my health coaching, when people come to me and they say, no, I was tested, I was negative. I said, let's retest you. So I actually like to, I have a specific test that I recommend. It's actually a lot more affordable. It's $265. And through Global Lyme Diagnostics, I know the CEO, I know the science behind it. And what they do is they check the IgG and IgM markers, which means IgG means past infection and exposure, and IgM means present infection. And it will actually show you if you have been exposed in the past or current. And I like that. And I like that test a lot. It's very active and reactive, and you get results in a week. So it's a great test.
Does this test also let you see the bands? Like, does it give you that as well?
So that one specifically for 265 does not. That one tells you if you've been past exposed or current infection. And it shows you a number too of the range. Like if you're off the charts, you have a certain range too.
Okay.
And then they always refer you out and say, you know, the Western blot is the one that tells you the bands.
Okay.
So they always say back it up with a Western blot after that. So if you just want to get a basic test to find if you've had any exposure, any current Lyme present in your body, I start there at a lower rate, excuse me. And it's a great one because it's immune responsive test. So, yeah.
I'm curious if when people are testing, and based on what you were saying previously, this might not be necessary for this particular test that you're talking about, the Global Lyme Diagnostics test, but I'm curious if sometimes people, it's like, yes, no, depending on how they're feeling, would it maybe be ideal to test during a time when you're not quite feeling well? Like if you are in what we as Endo Sisters call an endo flare or feeling chronic fatigue, like if you're feeling funky, is that the time to test?
Absolutely. I would say yes, absolutely. It's not the time when you're feeling your best, I guess. Probably not the greatest time to, when you're having the flare, and that's what we call it too with Lyme disease. We get these flares, you know, whether it's diet induced, weather induced, stress induced. Yeah, no, that when you're feeling your funkiest or not so great, I would say, go in and get that tested, you know,
It sounds to me like it can potentially go a little bit dormant. Like you were saying earlier, those little buggers, like they hide, they go a little bit dormant. And then when sort of the shit hits the fan in your body, they come out and they're like, it's party time. And so they might show up better on the test. So that's what I'm envisioning. Right.
Yeah. Especially around the full moon, those bugs like come out. So I don't know. That was another thing I was thinking of is, I don't, you know, with endo too, I mean, it revolves, you know, around your cycle, but you know, the moon plays a big part in how I feel. I'm an empath. I feel a lot of different things, but that could be another good time, you know, because the bugs are flaring and having a party, like you said, around the moon. And that's when I feel my most aches and pains, honestly. It's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I actually just noticed this last full moon, my energy totally tanked.
Yeah.
And I could feel myself go, like I cleared out a lot. It wasn't that on the day of the actual full moon, but it was like within 2 days of it, I was like wiped out. So by that Friday, I cleared my whole schedule because I was like, all right, I'm going to binge Netflix because that's all I got energy for.
Interesting. It's so interesting. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I actually look on the calendar and I mark when the moon is. I try just when to be aware of it, but I try not to focus on it.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, because I've had times where I'll actually have a positive energy shift. Like I think it just depends on what's happening in our bodies and our health and our wellness and our mental wellness, like where we are and what we're focusing on. I think wherever we tend to be, sometimes it just gets brighter.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like. the
Yeah.
moon's brighter and I can feel all this stuff more.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they say it's the ebb and flow,
Right.
of it's like we're 80% water, and so with the gravitational pull and the moon and stuff, that's why you're feeling those shifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. So
I know.
fascinating. Maybe we'll have to hop on another time and just talk about like the moon phases and the
Oh my
cycle
gosh,
phases and how that
right?
would be fun. So I love that you shared this global Lyme diagnostics test, the one for like 265 and gives you the IgG and the IgM. I'm curious, and this may or may not be a thing. I'm curious if you have any sort of special link or code where like you sharing this information gives you a little boost for being a person who shares this information. Do you have anything like that for this test?
Well, I'm not associated with Global Lyme Diagnostics in any way, shape, or form. I don't get anything. There's no kickbacks and nothing like that. I built a relationship with them. They came out and did a Lyme screening in Seattle for us. It was very cool. And it was something I put on through my nonprofit. So no, it wasn't anything. I'm not associated with them in any way.
I was just going to make sure we all knew the link so that we could.
I can give you the link.
We could support you. No, I just meant if you got that, I wanted to make sure we knew your link so we could support you. But okay, no, that's great. So Global Lyme Diagnostics. So you guys, that's the lower price point test. So that is Tavia's suggested starter test. And then based on, those results, you can back it up with that Western blot test.
Correct.
Was that correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm really interested in getting tested and just seeing what comes up, or just seeing for myself, for my body, for my knowledge, because it's so good to know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I wanted to mention something else I didn't get to, but one of the things with Lyme too, this is going to open up a whole nother ball field, is you can have co-infections or secondary infections from Lyme, from the tick. And what those secondary infections, some of the names are Bartonella, Babesia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You may have heard of that. So sometimes people get these co-infections or secondary infections, but they don't test positive for Lyme. And they can be just as troublesome, just as bothersome, just as much of a pain in the butt as just the Lyme itself. So I actually have some of those co-infections too. And the co-infection, the Lyme is actually the easier part to get rid of. You can get on antibiotics. And even if it's not, you don't have the bullseye's rash and it's a chronic infection, there's still things you can do to start treating the Lyme. It's those darn co-infections, secondary infections that live in your body that can also wreak havoc on things. And Bartonella is a big one. Bartonella is actually, cat scratch fever. That's what Bartonella is. So if you have cats, what if fleas get on cats, so it's all, see how that trickles down. So Bartonella can be, my cat had Bartonella and that's what he died of. And so I don't know if I got it from him. I don't know, but this was some years back, but so there's these co-infections too. And so a lot of times people just stop with the Lyme, and it's like, you need to also kind of check on those co-infections or be aware of them. So what I'm getting at is like your journey. Yeah. Like I'm sensitive, and I understand when the comment was made, I don't need another diagnosis. I'm sensitive to that too. I had every diagnosis in the book, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But on the same hand, if you want to fight, you want to live, if you have the power and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired like you or me, I don't care what the diagnosis is necessarily. The bottom line is it all comes back to the immune system, right? It all comes back to taking care of your body, eating right, feeding your body the foods your body needs to heal. So in a nutshell, even if you don't take the Lyme, if you decide not to take the Lyme test and you're watching here today, that's okay. That's okay. And just know that you're doing the right things by being here, listening, being aware of it, and keep doing the things you need to do, to keep that immune system going. Because the treatment wouldn't be necessarily super different. It would just be maybe additioning, maybe adding some things in to, going down that road a little bit. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes, that makes perfect sense. And I'm really curious do those co-infections, do those have test options as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And Global Lyme does do those as well too. So you can do them like
Okay.
an add-on.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's,
So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So if any of us go to Global Lyme Diagnostics, we can kind of peruse around and look at the different testings, the different co-infections. Like, are we going to see those particular ones you mentioned?
I don't know if they have those more information on that. I have a website two websites that I would love to share with people.
Yes, please.
One is my own personal one. It's called Days of My Lyme.
Yeah, I love that.
Of our lives. I used to love Days of Our Lives, the soap opera. So I don't know. daysofmylyme.com is my own personal journey. There's information all about Lyme, co-infections, frequently asked questions. So there's a lot of resources on that site. And then the other site that I actually have a nonprofit that I started for Lyme people. And it's fightingtiger.org. fightingtiger.org. And that's, again, information about Lyme, information about how we help people get tested. So we do offer grants for people that do need to get tested. And you can fill out an application, submit an application, and get, if you need a little bit of financial help, we do offer that when the funds are available. And we do have some funds available right now, which is exciting. So if you need a little financial help and you're thinking, yeah, I want to get tested, I think this is something that's for me, then reach out. Yeah. So there's some help available.
Yes, thank you so much. So daysofmylyme.com and fightingtiger.org.
Yep.
And both of those are ways that you guys can keep in touch with Tavia to find out more about Lyme, to find out more about those co-infections, to find out more about testing procedures, or, if you have specific questions, reach out to her. If you know you have Lyme or think you might have Lyme, she is so fantastic about working with you through the stages to get your body back into ease, back into a healing, wholesome, almost said wholesome, which is wholesome too, though, right? But getting that body back more at ease so that you can get back to living your life. Because the thing is I know that with chronic disease, with multiple diagnoses, when we don't know what's happening in our body, when we're in chronic pain, when we have chronic fatigue, a lot of times we just sort of shut down and go, this is my life. And that's just not the case. Better is always possible. So she's a fellow Endo sister. So if you have questions, if you need some support, reach out to her. She's here to work with you and to walk you through your own journey, and to really support you there. And like she said, there's that grant money. So if you want to get tested, go to her website and apply and see if you can get into that, because I'm sure it won't be there for very, very long. So
limited quantity is limited supply. So once it's gone, it's gone. We get donations throughout the community, and and I support a lot of different people as much as I can, as much as the money allows.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. Well, Tavia, I'm so glad you were here today sharing such amazing information. Thank you so much for just being here with us and, and talking about such an important topic for the community.
Definitely. I want to thank you so much. And I just wanted to end with, I turned my Lyme into sweet lemonade, and you can too. You can turn around your life too. And I just pay it forward and help others, and offer, coaching, also for coaching around Lyme disease as well. So if you do happen to get a diagnosis of Lyme and you need to discuss that more, I do offer coaching services around that. So keep that in mind as well. So
yeah, she's your girl. So check out our website and stay connected so that you can get all the information, support, accountability, coaching, help, options you need. Because the only wrong way to deal with disease is to just decide that it's your life and go ahead and put the nails in your own coffin and be miserable and suffer. Like, that's a choice. It's a choice. We can fight, we can survive, we can thrive, we can nourish. And so thank you so much, Tavia. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. As always, let us know if there are hot topics that you are really wanting information on. Reach out to Kristen McCroby, reach out to myself directly. We are here to support you. We are here to love you through. We are here to give you feedback and answers and solutions, and to continue to interview fantastic experts and practitioners so that we can all together have thriving bodies and feel better, because better is always possible. So thank you so much, and we will see you next week.